Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the Spiritist Talk series promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation, occurring every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm very happy to be here to host this talk by Sonia Doi, who will be leading our live with the theme Faith and Cellular Responses. Before we move on to the presentation, I would ask you to note that on the screen there is a QR code. If you want to help the USSF produce more publications and promote Spiritism to everyone, scan the QR code on screen for your donation. Now, back to Sonia Doi. It is so good to have you with us today. Together with everyone who is watching this live broadcast now, I want to give you a very warm welcome. It is so good to have you here to discuss faith and cellular responses. I'm sure you are as eager as I am to hear from Sonia. And before she starts to enlighten us in the next hour, please allow me to formally introduce her. Sonia is the president of the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society of Maryland, the U.S. Spiritist Medical Association, and the International Spiritist Medical Association. She graduated in medicine from the University of Sao Paulo, Brazil, specializing in endocrinology. Please take this opportunity to send your questions during the presentation using the chat window. Sonia has reserved time to address your comments and questions once she concludes her presentation. And now, Sonia Doi.
Thank you all. It's so nice to be here with all of you. So I'm very thankful to the USSF that allows me to discuss this topic with all of you. Thank you, Bradley, for the very nice presentation. And so as Bradley said, the topic that I'm going to focus on today is faith and cellular responses. So here are the outlines. I'm going to start talking about the concept of faith, then following with some notions of placebo and nocebo effects, and discuss the effects of faith on health, both the scientific and spiritist teachings, and then follow with what is the most important part of this talk, which are the cellular mechanisms, both again through the scientific and spiritist point of view. Dr. William Osler, considered the father of modern medicine, who contribute to the medical education and actually contribute to the great prestige of Johns Hopkins University, once said, "Nothing in life is more wonderful than faith, the one great moving force which we can neither weigh in balance or test in the crucible." Crucible is that container used in laboratory, and in Portuguese, for some of you who speak Portuguese, the name is cadinho. When we talk about faith, usually the first meaning that comes to life is the religious meaning. And in that sense, faith can be defined as the belief, trust, and obedience in relation to God or the divine. It is basically the confidence based on spiritual perception rather than proof. But faith has also a non-religious meaning, which can be defined as complete trust or confidence in someone or something. For example, self-confidence that we use, for example, when we have to take a test, when that help us in that job interview. That's self-confidence. It's a type of faith. Also, it could be applied to trust in a system, and that leads us to take actions without hesitation if we are moved by trust. A protector spirit in a message in the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 13, says that faith is both human when it's directed towards earthly needs, and is divine when it's directed to spiritual aspirations. So faith can be applied to material things, material needs, and to spiritual aspirations. That's why he says faith is both human and divine. He also stated that a fruitful faith is an active faith. And it says, if humans use their will together with faith, they can perform wonders. So faith itself does nothing. Faith is something that allows us to be active in some way, some form. So faith gives us the impulse, gives us the force, the strength when we have a will towards one or another thing. You may all remember, because this is very famous, that passage, biblical passage, that was recorded by Matthew. When a man comes, brings his boy who was tormented by evil spirits, bring it to Jesus and said, your disciples could not cure him. Please have mercy. And Jesus rebuked the spirit left, and the boy was cured. So then the disciples were, Master, why we could not cure the boy? And then Jesus said that famous sentence that we all know: if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move from here to there, and the mountain would move, and nothing will be impossible for you. So Christ, in addition to cures, many cures, also performed miracles, material miracles. For example, the miracle of multiplication of bread and fish. And through those miracles, Jesus also wanted to demonstrate what humans can do when they have a solid faith. There are, in this past decade, or past decades, I would say, more and more scientific data has been published showing that religious and spiritual belief has a significant impact on health. And that can promote better response to treatment, promote disease improvement, even increase longevity, healing, and cure of diseases. So here, I think it's worth to very briefly differentiate cure and healing. Cure is the restoration of physical health, while healing is that notion of establishing wholeness in all the domains of well-being: physical, social, mental, and spiritual well-being. But in this talk today, I'm going to concentrate in cure in its physical meaning, because we are going to talk about cellular responses. So we're going to concentrate in cure on that manner, not in healing as a whole. So there's been enormous amount of research doing on how faith, how is expressed and is manifested in changes in the physical body. Dr. Jeff Levin, in an article published in 2009, after analyzing a lot of data that has been published, he said that all this data showed that expressions of faith in God or in whoever, whatever, are potentially therapeutic. So expressions of faith in God, whomever, or whatever are potentially therapeutic. So not only a specific religious faith. And he said that the mechanisms underlying those positive responses that we see elicited by faith are similar to those that are induced by placebo. So that's why he says faith in God or whomever or whatever. So the faith in the doctor who is taking care of you or whatever, the medication that you were taking can they work in the same through the same mechanisms of religious faith. So here is important to say a little bit about placebo effect, because as Dr. Levin said, all the mechanisms are similar. So the placebo effect is the confidence that patients have on the medication or the procedure performed on them, and this activates physiological mechanisms that will contribute to the efficacy of the treatment, even when the patient does not receive the active treatment agent, which is then called placebo. So, of course, if you are taking a medication, if you are being under a procedure like surgery, if you have faith on that, that contributes to the success of the treatment. But what it's saying here, and that's what's called placebo effect, is that this confidence, this trust also works when the patient is not receiving an active treatment. So placebo is the inactive pharmacological agent that is indistinguishable in appearance from the comparator medication. Excuse me. The term placebo is also applied to surgery or other procedures when you compare a real surgery with a simulated surgery or sham surgery. Here is just to kind of clarify a little bit. Placebo is used in what we call randomized controlled clinical trials, which are used in pharmaceutical industry to test medications, new medications, before they are approved to go in the market. Usually these clinical trials are double-blinded, meaning the patients are divided into groups. One receives the real medication, the other group receives an inactive compound that is very similar, that is absolutely similar, indistinguishable from the medication. And this is double-blinded, meaning not the physician or the patient knows what is what. There is, of course, somebody in the group, in the study group, that controls this, that has all the data, but the person who knows what is what does not participate in the clinical trial. So the patient, and of course this is all done within ethical regulations, so the patient knows that it may be taking an inactive drug, inactive compound, but they assume the risk. So once the clinical trial is over, then all the data is analyzed and the labels are open, meaning then we know who took what, which group took what, and then we analyze. So this graph here shows, for example, in the first bar, the active agent. And let's say that we are measuring there the therapeutic effect, whatever it is, meaning, for example, decrease of pain. So there is a lot more patients that took the active agent that had a better decrease of pain. And dummy agent, meaning the placebo, or the medication, the inactive compound, those have a lower response. And the lowest bar on the right are patients who had no treatment. So for this, the effect was very small. But you see that the group that received placebo is not like no treatment. They have some response. So that's what we call placebo effect, when there is some response without the active medication that is directed to whatever response we are measuring. So of course, in the industry, the medication should always perform significantly better than placebo, and that's when the drug may be considered effective and may be approved. I'm saying maybe because this is not all that's taken in account for approval of medications. But there's also the nocebo effect, which is the negative effect. In that case, the mind is engaged in a negative suggestion. For example, physician says, well, there are so many bad side effects with this medication, and the patient becomes so fearful that they do not trust the medication, and they have even a negative effect to that. Or when the doctor has a bad demeanor towards the patient, and that ruins the patient's hope. And I will tell you a story. I want to try to be brief. I had a friend who was a member of our Spiritist Center, and she had rectal cancer. So at one point, she was in the hospital with, and the doctor with his residents came to the room to give her the bad news. So he said, well, unfortunately, you have so many metastases, and at this point, there's nothing else I can do for you. So she was a person of strong faith, and she looked at him and said, but doctor, I believe in miracles. And he looked at her and very coldly said, but I don't, and left the room. So imagine how devastated that person was. If she was going to have try any treatment, how devastated, because he already told her that nothing would work. Fortunately, because she was a person of strong faith, and she was a person, and she was in our Spiritist Center, we could give her support, we could help her to kind of phase out this negative effect. Dr. Bruce Lipton, actually, this is a great book. I really recommend that you read it because it has a lot more than what I am able to explain right now in this talk. But it's a book called The Biology of Belief, and this is the newest edition after 10 years that he published the first one. And he says that placebo effect is the faith effect. It's not different from any other faith. And so, as in the placebo effect, the cure of diseases through religious faith depends on how strong the patient's faith is. Same thing with the placebo. The strongest notion, the strongest faith, trust in the medication that may be a placebo will actually end up in good results. It's interesting that medications for depression, there have been a lot of papers published showing that these the placebo effect in depression works sometimes even better than medication. Can you believe that? So some psychiatrists dare to say, why giving medication with so many horrible side effects? Use something. Use other types of therapies, because they work in depression better than the placebo effect is better than the medication itself. So even in the hands of a powerful healer, if the patient is resistant and do not believe, the cure may not occur. And you can remember talking about the strong faith, the case of that woman, the bleeding woman, who her faith was so strong that she just touched Jesus' tunic and she was cured. And Jesus used to say, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Your faith has healed you. So it's the patient's faith that is important more than the healer. Of course, in this case, Jesus cannot even be compared to any of us. He is a pure spirit. He has achieved a pure state, moral state. So there's no even comparison. But he wanted to, but this is an example of strong faith. So it's also interesting that Dr. Herbert Benson, who was a pioneer in mind-body medicine here in the US, after he was a famous cardiologist and did so much research, was a very serious researcher at Harvard University. And after doing lots and lots and lots of his research, he wrote this book called Timeless Healing. And at the end of this book, he puts a disclaimer. And in that disclaimer, he has this beautiful sentence. I am astonished that my scientific studies have so conclusively shown that our bodies are wired to believe, that our bodies are nourished and healed by prayer and other exercise of belief. So the importance of this statement is that he came to this conclusion after doing lots and lots of research. And he came to the conclusion that it's the belief, is that the faith that acts in our body. So there's been a vast scientific research demonstrating the positive effect of faith and religious or spiritual practices on health. So the effects are shown. There's lots of data. There's no more question that religious, spiritual faith really promotes better health and so forth, so on. The question is, how does it happen? And on that realm, studies on the biological mechanisms involved in the mind-body processes have been published more recently. There's not not as many as the ones that demonstrate just the effect. The mechanisms have now been studied deeper and deeper into very intricate biological mechanisms of the cell. So this is a moving field. There's still a lot of things being discovered, and it's really fascinating in view of all that we have been, we know from Spiritism. So much of what we learned about the mind-body connection comes from André Luiz through the mediumship of Francisco Xavier in several books. In the book Evolution in Two Worlds that was published in 1958, André Luiz explains that under the command of the mind, the nervous system integrates all tissues and organs of the physical body. And their functions are controlled by hormones and substances that are produced according to different emotional states. In scientific research, around the 70s, papers start to come out that were discussing that thoughts, sentiments, emotions are perceived by the brain, and the brain then communicates with the neuroendocrine system, stimulating the production and release of hormones, neuropeptides, and other substances that interact with several organs and tissues, including the immunological system. And that gave rise to a new discipline that was called psychoneuroendoimmunology. This was around the 75. And it's a long name, right? And it's very, very complex too. And so psychoneuroendoimmunology, to make it short, is known as PNEI. So what is PNEI, this acronym of psychoneuroendoimmunology? Here is some figures just to kind of illustrate very briefly, because it's a lot more complex than what is shown here in this figure. But in this figure on the left, you see that the signals that are received in the hypothalamus or activate the pituitary gland, which is the gland that commands the whole endocrine system of the body. And then through some hormones, the pituitary sends signals to all the glands that are distributed in the body, and then you can see in the figure on the right. But the most important gland in the system is the adrenal gland that produces what we know as stress hormones, one of them being the cortisol and also adrenaline. But cortisol is also a hormone that interacts with the immune system because it activates the immune cells. And then the immune cells produce other substances that are called cytokines. And these cytokines go back and interact with the nervous system. So that creates a cycle. And that's kind of a very brief summary of this integration, this integrated system that activates the brain, the endocrine, and the immune system. Dr. Harold Koenig, one of the greatest scientists in the field of spirituality and health, after analyzing a lot of data published in 2012, he published a summary of all this and stated that spiritual beliefs have a positive influence on the immune and endocrine systems that play a critical role in health maintenance and disease prevention. So again, showing that this system is actually active and works in preventing disease or maintaining health. And these data also demonstrated that patients who identify themselves as spiritual exhibit significantly better immune functions, as well as lower levels of stress hormones, compared to patients that are identified as non-spirituals. So the effect is kind of flows through this system and is active. Dr. Candace Pert also demonstrated that in a kind of network mechanism that she called psychosomatic interactive network. And through this, she discovered the neuropeptides and discovered that some neuropeptides and discovered that these neuropeptides had receptors all over the body, things that people didn't know at that time. You know, people thought that neuropeptides are active only in the brain. No, she showed that there are mechanisms, there are receptors all over the body, and that's why when the brain releases those substances, they are active in several organs of the body. So that's what she calls a psychosomatic, somatic body, psycho mind, interactive network. And she says that this network now shows that the physical and mental are not two separate compartments as they were treated before, that they are connected by these neuropeptides and their receptors. So one more view of how the mind interacts with the whole body. So there's no question that the mind interacts with the body, and that's been shown through measurement in the laboratory of hormones and several substances collected in the blood, also by imaging studies that show activation of certain areas of the brain by emotions and thoughts. But the question is how the manifestations of the mind are transmitted to the brain. And yet, this is yet unclear in the scientific literature. So, yes, it's certain that the mind communicates, but the how is still a question. And scientific literature is not, does not have a solid response to that. However, there are some scientific studies on near-death experience that support the concept that the mind is not a physical structure. However, whether the mind is physical or extra-physical remains controversial within the scientific world. There are still scientists that affirm that mind is a product of the physical brain. In Spiritism, we have no question. Because André Luiz has elucidated us through several books, again, psychographed by Francisco Xavier, that telling us that the thoughts, sentiments, emotions are originated in the mind, and that the mind belongs to the spirit. So it's not a physical structure, is extra physical. And as I said, this is a dilemma, how the mind, an entity of the non-physical dimension, interacts with the brain in the physical dimension. The dilemma is resolved if we understand that the manifestations of the mind are in the form of energy and that the physical body perceives and responds to energetic stimuli. So it's the interaction between mind, spirit, and body is kind of analogous to the rover, what is the name? Perseverance rover that's now in Mars, and its programmer, the person who programmed it, who built it and programmed it, it's working there as it's a super intelligent machine, as the brain is in the machine. However, the brain is not there. The brain is outside of the machine, is in the programmer, in the person who actually programmed, built this complex system. The same is with us human beings. The spirit is the intelligent part that communicates with the body and makes this, our human body, a wonderful machine. So the intelligent part of the body is the mind, which is non-physical, that commands the physical body, which is made of matter. And this energy-matter interaction is better understood if we look at it through the lens of quantum theory. So I'm not an expert. I will not dare to explain you all about this theory. But the important thing is, if we think of our body as made of physical body, I'm talking about physical body made of matter, and matter is made of atoms and subatomic particles that are all based on energy, and that matter is just a solidified energy because it is a low energy compared to light, for example, or other forms of energy. So it has a much lower, it isn't has energy, but is in a much lower dimension than other forms of energy that we know. So let's talk a little bit more about the energetic composition of the human being. We know that we have a perispirit, and that this perispirit is made of a special type of matter. Again, Andrea Luiz is who comes to tell us that the perispirit is equipped with 7 energy centers that in Hinduism is known as chakras. The most important of those is the crown center, which is the intermediary between the spirit and the psychosomatic network in the body. It is the crown, through the crown center, that the mind commands all the other centers. But it's interesting that next to the crown center is the cerebral center that commands the endocrine system in response to the crown center. So they're closely together. The electromagnetic field of the body is not a question in Oriental medicine. In Oriental medicine, the body is represented by a complex energy network, and treatment is based on manipulating the energy flow in this network, for example, acupuncture. But the spirit Andrea Luiz again comes to elucidate, and he says the perispirit is a vehicle of electric cells, which can be defined as an electromagnetic field in which thought vibrates in a closed circuit. So, thought that is originated in the mind, but spirit is circulating through our whole system. And that's how it's so interactive with all our cells. It's the vibration of the mind that is communicating with the vibrations of the perispirit, which communicates with the vibrations of our cells, of our body cells. It has been shown, this is, of course, was not a very well accepted theory, that energy is perceived by our cells and can promote changes in the cells. You know, the more traditional doctors, more traditional scientists are not very do not accept this so easily. However, the environmental electromagnetic fields, such as microwave radio frequencies, the visible light, and other types of energy fields, have been shown to shape the health and fate of biological systems by controlling several cellular functions, including gene regulation. This is done, for example, with instruments that emit, that has emit or produce an electromagnetic field, and that's accepted. But when you talk about these electromagnetic fields produced by the mind, then there's like a blockade in the concept. And coming back to André Luiz, he says the spirit influences the cytoplasm of the cells, the interstitial element of interaction between the spiritual and physical energies. Again, this was in Evolution into Words, published in 1958. Epigenetics, that talks about the effect on the cytoplasm that regulates the nucleus of the cells, only came in the 1970s. Here is just a brief, I know that I'm running out of time, so it's a brief explanation of epigenetics that explains how proteins in the cytoplasmic compartment of the cell can regulate DNA, which was before thought impossible. So here is another information from André Luiz that's so much deeper and so important. He says in the same book, Evolution into Worlds, that through the mind, he goes more precise. First, he says the spirit interacts with the cytoplasm of the cell. Now he goes more specific, and he says through the mitochondria, the mind transmits to the body all its happy or unhappy feelings, leading to balance or imbalance of the mitochondrial biosynthetic processes. Mitochondria is illustrated on this figure here. The figure actually illustrates a cell, a human cell, and you see the arrow representation. This is not a picture, this is just a representation of an organelle, a structure called mitochondria inside of the cytoplasm of the cell. Mitochondrion is the singular, mitochondria is plural, are the powerhouse of the cell that sustain life. They produce energy, all the energy that we need to maintain life. So without mitochondria, we cannot survive. Actually, there are diseases when mitochondria is defective and it's fatal. So recently, only recently, they have emerged as key components of the stress response. So before, nobody talked about mitochondria. Everybody looked at the mitochondria as a linked to metabolic pathways and production of energy to the cell. But now, very recently, this paper is 2018, some scientists are looking at changes in the mitochondria as response to stress. So the interaction between mitochondria and nucleus shapes how the cells as a whole responds to stress and challenges. This is what has been published, few articles, but another number, again, few articles have been also published to demonstrate beneficial effects of yoga practice on mitochondria. So mitochondria can respond to stress, which is a negative effect, but also can present changes, beneficial changes in response to, for example, in this case, yoga practice. So far, I have not identified, this is my disclosure, I have not identified any scientific support to state that mitochondria is also a mediator of faith. Not yet, but I believe that this will soon be demonstrated scientifically and give scientific support to what Andrea Luiz has shown long ago and was published since 1958. So to close, I'd like to bring this quote from Bruce Lipton that is at the end of his book, The Biology of Belief. And he says, we are made in the image of God, and we need to put spirit back into the equation when we want to improve our physical and our mental health. What a great quote. I hope other scientists like Bruce Lipton could come to this conclusion too. Thank you very much, and I hope that I have given you enough to think. This is not all. This is just seeds to think. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Sonia, for the information and reflections you provided. Now, we're open for comments and questions from the audience. From the United States Spiritist Federation, how do we express and strengthen our faith without being overconfident?
I think that the important thing, because this is another thing. We cannot be fanatic. We cannot have, being overconfident. We have just to use logic. So if we use logic, we can be confident on things based on logic, based on our common sense. So, for example, I cannot be overconfident on the market right now because in 2 minutes it may crash or something. So there are things that I can be confident, and there are things that I have to be very cautious. I don't think there's a recipe. I think this is an individual decision.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from the TVCEI International Spiritist Council. The Gospel, according to Spiritism, talks about rational faith versus blind faith. But in the case of cures, can blind faith be also useful?
In that case, I think what we have seen is that the placebo effect has shown that in some way this is a blind faith, meaning I have faith in something that is not even an active medication. However, I think when we talk about religious faith, that's a different thing. When we talk about religious faith, when we talk about spiritual faith, there are ways to know by understanding, by studying, what is that we make sense, what is logical about it. In terms of medication, in terms of the placebo effect, what I would say, and this has been shown, as I said, in cases of depression, what I would say is that it's not just blind faith. Let's use our mind. Let's use, there are so many practices that are offered in the word doesn't, in mind-body medicine that we can use. Just talk about passes. Let's talk about water. It's something that for now we don't some people may not understand that, although there are already several scientific data showing why that works. In terms of placebo medication, sometimes when you're confident on the placebo that is inactive actually, and it works, you are using your own faith. You are using your own resources. And that's useful. In that case, it is good. There is one paper showing that there was a surgical procedure done on the knee of people with arthritis. And the doctor did a comparison between those that they actually did the procedure fixing the problem, and others, they just made the hole and didn't do anything there. And these patients were good for 2 years after. They were still under no pain, so they were cured by their own mind. This is to show the power of our mind. So I think it's, we have to use our common sense again, and knowledge wherever it is available.
Good thoughts and good example. From Daniel Santos, in a very polarized world, how can one develop a rational faith?
I think in a polarized world, we have to decide which side of the pole we want to be, right? This side or that side. So rational faith. We always, and in the Spiritism, we talk about this. The importance of faith is to understand how things work, to know how things work, to have a logic view. So I don't know, Daniel, what you meant on a polarized world. We can always develop a rational faith if we study, if we apply it, if we put ourselves in a situation where we are the ones who decide. We are not pushed by other people to believe this or that. We are the ones who are who are driving the car. You have to understand what you believe.
Appreciate very much. Okay, from the Spiritist Network, we have a question. Is it necessary to be part of a religious community in order to fully develop faith?
No. I say no for several reasons. I say no because if you remember during the talk, I mentioned a paper by Dr. Jeff Levin. He is a scientist. He publishes a lot in spirituality and health. And he is a rabbi. And he came once to give a talk in our Spiritist Medical Association Congress. He was the one who wrote in his article, faith in God, in whomever or whatever works. Faith is that trust, that belief that moves you to something, to do something. And it's, Jesus showed that to us. It's believe in God when you are dealing with spiritual matters, or believe that you have the power to do that, to multiply bread, to whatever else, to pass a test, to achieve something. So it does not depend on a religious community. Of course, if we are in a religious community, and I want to say here, Spiritism is a great religious community, because it gives us the support to study and to understand faith. And that's really meaningful. That helps us to build a strong faith in God, a strong faith in our future, strong faith in who we are and what are our role in as incarnate spirits. So Spiritism gives us all the resources to understand faith and to build a strong, solid faith. So in that sense, I think so. When people start to think about other religions, or you see that many articles, they start by looking at religion and then they turn into spirituality to show that a lot of people say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, meaning I don't belong to a organized faith. And still, faith worked. And still faith works with placebo, which is nothing related to spiritual. Is the trust that you have in yourself. That's what is used in self-healing, in self-cure.
Okay, thank you. Very encouraging. So we have a question from the U.S. Spiritist Federation. What daily practices when we awake or go to sleep will help our minds and bodies?
Of course, this we learn in Spiritism. That's prayer, right? Meditation, because that puts our mind in tune with the spirit world, with the benefactors who are there to help us. In fact, this is another interesting point. And I believe this is in the book Between Earth and Heaven. I think it is, the Spirit Clarencio explains that when we are asleep, when our spirit is detached from the physical body, they have the opportunity to work on our perispirit in whatever is, for example, if we are sick, they can work on our perispirit, and these changes, this cure from the perispirit will then be transferred to the physical body. That takes time. It's not as, until everything is organized in the physical body. But he writes a complement to that, saying this process of spiritual cure is much strong. There's efficient. Is much efficient if the patient has faith and is involved in prayer. So here it is. We need to pray. We need to meditate. We need to be receptive So by praying, meditating, we turn ourselves receptive to the spirit world that works in our body, and that also controls our mind to decrease our stress level and balance up the good part of the good emotions, the good hormones and all that, endorphins and all the good hormones that are kind of circulating in our body.
Thank you. Very useful and very important for us to remember. So we have another question from the United States Spiritist Federation. Is there anything more that calls your attention that evolution in two worlds brings to us that science still has not proved?
There are so many things. In fact, we have a group in the Spiritist Medical Association that's formed by only physicians and scientists, and we are studying chapter after chapter of this book, Evolution in Two Worlds. And we are trying to understand what all the information that comes through André Luiz, and trying to compare that with what science has shown, and trying to find what, for example, what I talked about mitochondria. This is something that is only surfacing now in the scientific world, but the book was published in 1958. The other thing was the pineal gland and the production of melatonin. This was even published by Brazilian doctors in an article here in the US or international journal. I'm not sure if it was American or English journal. But anyways, the paper showing that the clarification from André Luiz about the production of melatonin preceded the information that came through science. So there's still many things there, and I think we need to continue studying.
Yes. So we have another question from the United States Spiritist Federation. Can an infant or child affect its chakras, even being so young?
I don't have data to answer this question, so I'm going to answer based on what I have learned. We remember that a child or an infant is a spirit, and this spirit has all the knowledge that in any time of its existence, whether it's a child, whether it's an adult. The only difference is that as a child, much of that knowledge, much of those manifestations are kind of suppressed. So they are not aware of that. So whether they can affect the chakras, the energy, I would say that it's more the environment, because we know that chakras are energetic points in the perispirit, right? And the energy of our chakras, our energy centers, interact with energy not only from our spirit, but from other spirits that connect with us through the pineal gland, through our crown center, and also the environment, the energy that is in the environment. All that matters. So I would say, yes, they can be affected. And that's why we need to be very careful with our children. I would say it's so good that we have the children education in the Spiritist centers, because that is already teaching the children that their behavior matter, the way they behave. We are teaching them to be connected with God, to pray, and we are kind of, teaching their parents that the environment in their home, when they do gospel at home and all that matters.
Thank you very, very much for that. So we have a wonderful comment from Marcia Bennett.
Thank you.
Excellent talk. I would suggest daily meditation as a way of connecting to the spiritual world and to keep up with the Spiritist studies. Very inspirational reflections of yours. Thank you.
Thank you all. I agree, Master.
And we have a comment from Elaine Drysdale.
Oh, my friend Elaine. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a clear synthesis of the mechanisms of spirit, mind, body connections. It's always such a pleasure to hear Dr. Sonia Doi present a lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
And we have a comment from Abby Scher. Good morning. I will go back to listen to this from the beginning. For me, I just believe in God, and I have faith that there is a power that is bigger than me. I'm open to all religious and healing groups. God is God everywhere. I am grateful for Spiritism and what I have learned.
Thank you, Abby. I'm absolutely in agreement with what you say. God is God, whatever. Even if you don't, even for those who do not believe.
Okay, I believe that will conclude all of our questions and comments. Thank you, Sonia, and to everyone who watched today's live talk, and those who have been following our weekly Spiritist Talk series. And be certain not to miss our next live next Saturday, January 28th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, when we will have Marcia Trajano speaking with us on becoming your best self. Sonia, before we close the live, would you please say a prayer?
Yes. So at this moment, let's connect with the spirit world, with God, with the divine. Very thankful for all the knowledge that comes to us, that clarifies our minds, that help us in conducting our lives and making the best of it. Very thankful to the benefactor spirits who are bringing all this knowledge to us, and they are allowing us to learn through their teachings. I'm thankful, and I like to ask our Master Jesus to bless us all, to continue inspiring us on studying and in the practice of faith, of the love to our neighbors and sisters. Let us all vibrate the best in us to emanate love and peace towards all our brothers and sisters around the planet. Master Jesus, bless us all, and so be it.
Thank you, and may all of you have a calming and mindful weekend.